Present.
Glendalis Colon,
Present.
Diosa Martinez,
Present.
Bryant Estrada,
Present.
Sonia Grace is connecting now.
Sam.
And Hugo Figueroa is not with us yet, but he'll join us shortly. And Stephanie Gonzalez, I am also present. We are actually, for those of you who are attending the meeting today, we are going to go into an executive session first and then come back to discuss the other items on our agenda. So I'd actually like to ask for a motion to move into executive session from one of our board members.
Motion to move into executive session.
Second.
Brian, if you could just read the item as it's written on the agenda. Sorry, item 2.
I can do that. I have the agenda if you want. Executive motion. I move that we enter into executive session under Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5, parentheses A, parentheses 1 and parentheses 2, A, discussion of litigation, and B, discipline hearing.
Great, thank you. It was a motion was made by Vice Chair Sonia Grace. A second?
Second.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Yes, Diosa.
Oh,
E
second.
aprovado por Diosa.
Roll call vote. Glendalis Colon,
Yes.
Andrew Branson,
Yes.
Diosa Martinez,
Yes.
Bryant Estrada,
Yes.
Sonia Grace,
Yes.
and I too am a yes.
E eu também sou um sim. Então, agora nós vamos passar para a sessão executiva. O que vai acontecer aqui da diretoria?
Have the executive session. This Zoom meeting will remain open, so attendees should stay on this meeting. We will come back to this Zoom meeting once we're done with the executive session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I am just waiting for all board members to join us in this meeting. I believe we have
On the side of the bed.
Andalise. I think we're waiting for Diosa and Hugo. I see Diosa came on.
Wow, thank you everybody for waiting.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we are going to get started. I'm sure Hugo will join very shortly. So the first thing we're going to do is that I will entertain a motion to seal the minutes of
Hold
the
on just a
executive
second.
session.
You need- Hold on just a second. I just want to close out and note what time we come back. for the minutes and all that.
Oh, yep.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
So I'll entertain a motion to seal the minutes for the executive session that we just had.
So moved.
So moved by Andrew Bramson, seconded by
Second.
Glenda Colon. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are sealed. So during executive session, the board took action on 2 recommendations by district leadership. The first action was to uphold the recommendation by Assistant Superintendent Lynch to continue the suspension of an employee for 5 days. That action was upheld unanimously by all board members. The second motion was to uphold a recommendation also by Assistant Superintendent Lynch to continue a 10-day suspension for the same employee. Board members voted unanimously to uphold that decision. I again want to say thank you to everyone who's on the meeting, who continue to be on the meeting. You know, it's been 2 hours. So I just want to say how grateful I am that you all have remained. The next item on the agenda is the consideration of the meeting minutes of July 2nd. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve meeting minutes of July 2nd.
Motion made by Sonia Grace, a second.
Second.
Second by Andrew Bramson. All those, any discussion, comments, questions?
I abstained my vote. I wasn't at the meeting.
Eu não estava na reunião.
Okay. So all those in favor,
Entonces,
please-
aquellos en favor digan aye.
Aye.
any opposed?
Y aquellos que no están de acuerdo.
We have 1 abstention by Brian Estrada.
Okay.
All right, the meeting minutes are approved.
So,
The next item is the
El
consideration,
próximo, Lisa,
including any new appointments, layoffs, rescission, resignations, recalls, and retirement. Dr. Toledo, do you want to walk us quickly through the, not quickly, sorry, I don't know why I said quickly, but do you want to walk us through the personnel memo?
I would be happy to, and quickly sounds just fine. So we have a few team members who are making transitions, a retirement and some resignations. Sorry, as I had so many screens up for the different documents, I'm just getting back to it. But do want to share that just in the last few days, we've had resignations from Principal Milisauskas of Calcut, Principal Santelices Ramos of Veterans, and Director of Technology Osiris Gonzalez, as well as Miss Gramus, who taught at Captain Hunt. They're all transitioning to different roles in different districts. So we wish them all well and thank them for their time in Central Falls, and also want to congratulate one team member on her retirement. Just trying to get to that document, my apologies.
While you're looking for that, I think, are the interpreters back in their channels?
son canales.
Just wanted to confirm.
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you, Felipe. I forgot to make the announcement at the beginning. Si están en la reunión y quieren escuchar la reunión en español, pueden hacer clic abajo donde dice Interpretation, y cuando hagan clic ahí pueden escoger donde dice Spanish o español. Sonia.
Se precisar intérprete em português, clique o botão embaixo do ecrã que diz Interpretation e escolha a língua em português.
Thank you.
and again, just want to congratulate Miss Terry Rodriguez, who served as a personal care attendant in the district and is now retired. So want to congratulate her and thank her for her service.
Great. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the personnel memo that Dr. Toledo just walked us through.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Sonia Grace. A second?
Second.
Second by Brian Estrada. And now any discussion?
I have a question. Mr. Gonzalez, the IT director, so that's already a small team. What does this look like for you? And what does that mean for us trying to get Chromebooks to children and set up for the upcoming school year?
Great question. So Mr. Gonzalez really, I think, was thoughtful in his transition and had been talking to us for some time. He had just completed his master's and knew he was probably going to be looking for a role to apply some of that new knowledge. All that to say, he and Mr. Michael Ritchie have been working very closely together. In fact, previous to Michael coming on board, it was one role of data and technology. And so interestingly, we had 1 year where we were looking at these two departments separately, but because they work so closely, Mr. Michael Ritchie has been not only willing, but able to really take on a lot of the work of technology. And so our current thinking is that rather than hiring a new director of technology, to use part of that budget to hire more technicians. And so I was going to share a little bit more in the superintendent update later, but if there is anyone in the community who is interested in technology in that type of role, we'll be posting, hopefully by tomorrow, a position, and would love to bring on a community member to join the tech team. So providing more support rather than another director.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions for Dr. Toledo?
I do. I am so sad to see Ms. Ramos and Mr. M go. I wish them the best of luck. I want to thank them for their service. I am even more sad to see Mr. M because I built a personal relationship with him. He was the first principal in the district to really understand my son and help me with my child. So I'm really sad to see them go. I hope that as a district, we're conducting exit interviews. I'm really curious as to why of their departures, because we really need to try to hold on to the good ones. And I think, you know, were we supporting Ms. Ramos? Were we supporting Mr. M? Was there anything that we could have done for them in order to keep them longer? Did we fail at something? So just a lot of questions run through my head because I know that both of them did great work.
Thank you for sharing, especially the personal experience as a parent with those leaders. We are conducting exit interviews, and so happy to have Ms. Martinez circle back with the board to share any outcomes from those meetings, or certainly any things that we should be considering moving forward.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? Okay, hearing none, I have a motion on the table to approve the personnel actions by Sonia Grace. It was seconded by Brian Estrada. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the personnel actions passed. The next item on the agenda is the Central Falls School District budget consideration of bills.
Alright. Do you want a motion? Do you need a motion?
Yes, yes, please.
Motion to approve the bills, grants, and general budget.
Second? Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Glenda Liz Colon. Now a discussion. Sonia or Dr. Toledo, do you have,
I
do we have anything
didn't see
to?
anything out of the ordinary.
Okay.
With our
So,
limited amounts right now, we're trying to not do too much spending that's not essential, but I'd say the bulk of spending right now is on those unique items to prepare us for what will certainly be a most unique school year.
mhm. Great, thank you again, Sonia, for taking the time to sort of or to review, to preview, trying to put those words together, to preview the bills prior to coming to the board meeting. Certainly helpful for you to provide us with that insight. Any
It's a
questions
requirement.
or comments?
I just want to, like, it's clear, like, it's a requirement that my signature go on it before it moves forward. So as part of the checks and balances of the school district is having board review. If anyone wants to ever
Great.
join me, it's fun.
Sonia would like some company.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments on the bills? All right, so have a motion by Sonia Grace to approve, a second by Glenda Liz Colon. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The next item under item 4B is, item 6B is fiscal year 21 budget review, update and discussion. I will pass it along to either Dr. Toledo or our Director of Finance, Carrie Simmons. Dr. Toledo just let us know that her connection's a little bit unstable, so she's turning her video off, but I will let whoever wants to start.
No problem. This is Carrie, and it was on the superintendent's slide presentation, so I wasn't sure if she wanted to show it as I went through it, or do you just want a synopsis of it, Madam Chair?
I think it would be helpful to see it.
Okay.
I can share it, Carrie. I'm back.
Okay, wonderful. Thank
Keep
you.
getting kicked off, but I will.
It's okay.
Michael, if you could allow me to do screen sharing. Thank you.
Alrighty. So what we have here is it's the snapshot kind of what we seen last week. I mean, not last week, but last month in terms of our revenue and our projections and our expenses and our projections. So as we're closing out our books for FY20, I know you specifically asked about FY21, but just an update because the books are not closed for FY20. The major shift that we had was we actually received more in Medicaid than we anticipated. So kudos to our director of SPED. She is killing it. I believe we're at about 130% over what we were last year. And so that amounts to about $84,000 additional to the district. So, you know, we are grateful for that. And what we're going to do to make sure that we keep having increases within this framework, we've hired on a consultant who will, you know, train some of the staff so that we get an even higher reimbursement for next year. So I'm looking forward to that. Outside of that, there haven't been many more changes. If you go to the next slide, Dr. Toledo. This is on our expenditure side. So the one shift that you see here that you did not see last month is, so at the end of the year, there are bills that are in queue. Even though the deadline has passed, it's kind of like the service has been rendered, right? So even if you think about it in your own personal home, you have electricity for the month, but you don't get the electricity on that day. You get it a few days later to say what you owe. So what we owed at the end of the year is $800,000. That's that 8M there, or 0.8 M. And what that consists of is half of it is a payment to a charter at about $400,000. I'm just using round figures to make it simple. About $150,000 is for Chartwell's, our food service vendor. And then you have, different services that were still being performed towards the end of the year. What that left us with was a net change or deficit of $563,000. So I'm grateful and I'm glad that, RIDE is working with the legislative body, got us that additional $500,000, and that was rolled up into what we call the CARES Act money. If you go to the next slide. Thank you. Just need to move my own screen. So the CARES Act money of what we received, or not even received, but what we are awarded. I want to be clear about this. So, different school districts received various amounts. And how we received the amount is that the federal government gave the different states a certain amount of funding specifically for COVID issues. One was the CARES Act, the other one was COVID specific. The CARES Act was to fund, as you can see to the left, necessities to the main district, help provide school principals and leaders with resources to address individual needs, purchase educational technology, and as you can see forth on your screen. And so the CARES Act money was to supplement the funding that wasn't coming into the state. That's the ESSER part of the CARES Act. And so we will use some of that money to cover the deficit. The goal, because the ESSER money lasts longer than the COVID money, is to utilize that 500,000 or 563,000 shortfall that we had for the ESSER money. Find out what's within that 800,000 that I talked about of our payables. Use 563 so that we have a flat balance without even touching the fund balance that we had, which was 300,000. And then use the additional ESSER money to handle needs within the district. Now what we were allotted for the ESSER funds is 1.5 million. What we were allotted for the COVID money is 1.8 million. Now, again, just to be clear, we are not guaranteed any of that money. We have to apply for it, basically saying that we have expenditures that qualify if we spend it to be reimbursed. So that's how that works. And the COVID money has to be spent by December. It's going to be on the next slide. Don't go there yet, please, Dr. Toledo. It's going to be on the next slide. But this money here is how we kind of foresee, or how we did kind of foresee the ESSER money being spent. So you can see 48,000 for operations, 625,000. I know that was asked by a board member last time, how much are we spending on technology? So this is all of, basically, what we're doing and how we're moving strategically to make sure that the funds that are available to us are being applied and utilized in the right way. I know I just saw in the chat, someone asked how will we, or what are we doing to ensure the safety of our kids? Now, I don't want to go too far into maybe what the superintendent will talk about, but I can say from a budgetary standpoint, that $897,000, a lot of that is to ensure the safety of the kids. So if you can go to the next slide, Dr. Toledo.
And Carrie, I'm going to interrupt you just for a quick second, chime in. I am seeing some comments coming through the chat and also through the Q&A. We are having public comments, so you will be able to provide your comments to the board. Additionally, the superintendent under her comment is going to speak specifically about school reopening plans. And so it's coming. So we won't be sort of answering questions back and forth through the chat, but know that you will have an opportunity to provide the board with your comments, and the superintendent will be providing a specific update on school reopening. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So moving to FY21, I had the privilege of being on a call with Madam Chair and the superintendent and the assistant superintendent with RIDE. And these are the takeaways that I received from them, as well as I guess where we're going from a budgetary standpoint. So if you can see our June state aid, which is for, we receive it in June, but it's for July. Last year, it was at 2.7 million, right? The budget hasn't been passed at the state level. So basically they are only allowed to fund every district at 91% of what it was the prior year, and with some other contingencies. So what that amounts for this year is $2.4 million. That's what we received in July. So that is $324,000 less than what we received last year. We did an inquiry on our high cost special education in terms of, last year it was at 4.5. We were notified earlier before the year even took place, that it would only be $631 per month this year. So that is a shortfall of $4,000 that we'll receive every month. And that's basically because the cost of what we're providing those who need special education or have those services is not more than what they say 5 times the amount of the reimbursement. Our June stabilization last year was $666,000. This year was $535,000. So again, that's another shortfall as of right now of $131,000. So June, our money for July, and July that we received at the end of July for August have been both short of $459,000. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to be the case the rest of the year. Actually, it can't be the case. There's no way we would be able to survive. But that's where we are, and based off of the information we have for as many creative decisions and the goals that the superintendent would like to have for the district. I'm required to, have the hard reality of, that would be nice, but this is what we can afford, unless we're willing just to really go against the grain. And God forbid, who knows what those headlines would be, basically saying that Central Falls is spending money that they don't have when they just ask us for money. So we're trying to find that fine balance. I know I typically get a question from Abramson about, well, what's this mean for cash flow? So what this looks like is typically we run out of money, or I wouldn't say we run out, but things start to get really, really tight around April and May. If things were to continue as they are now, we would begin to have cash flow problems around February. So we're just hoping that the budget can be passed in September, and then that way we can have some more decisions in terms of that creative side of how we want to service our kids with the funds that are allotted and allocated to us. I believe that is the last slide, although there may be one more. So here it is. So on this slide, this shows how we plan on spending that COVID money. It's vetted by the superintendent, and it's vetted by the director of operations, because they're the closest to the vision and to actually making it happen. And, you know, I kind of do some of the calculations on the back end, but it's talking about the amount of money we would have to spend on hand sanitizers. That's about $29,000, disinfectant wipes. And this is for the year, 34,000 no-touch thermometers, so that, you know, as people are coming in, we have those on tap at 500,000, or $500. I'm sorry, not $500,000, $500. Oximeters, those are what regulate people's pulses. Should you know, a reaction happen, and again, I'm not a nurse or a doctor, so if I'm using that term correctly, please forgive me, but I believe that's what that's for. Then, as well as you have hiring custodial staff to make sure that there's proper sanitation, you know, budgeting $204,000 down there. Nurses, $370,000. And the key that RIDE keeps emphasizing with us is that these expenses of how we want to use the COVID money cannot be anything that was budgeted last year. And so for me, I mean, I guess the way that, you know, my mind kind of works is, you know, that's kind of easy for us because we had a budget, but we also had expenses that were not in the budget for last year, which is how we have a deficit. So I think there's some wiggle room there. I'm sure you can see it on your screen. You know, we have gloves for $4,000. You know, there are certain power pressure machines that the custodial staff will have to have. So, you know, that's built into here. Additional transportation and routes, because you can only have a certain amount of kids within a certain distance. So we've done our due diligence, not to say that we've come up with every answer, but we have vetted what we could see and put a cost and a price and a value to it. So I believe that's the last slide. That's my presentation on my part, and I turn it back over to the superintendent or the chair if we're pausing at this point in time for questions.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you, Carrie, for, you know, always coming through with the great presentations for us to better understand how our finances are sort of shifting and moving, especially during these times. I do want to open it up to board members for questions. Yes, sorry, I almost called you Brandon. Yes, Andrew.
Thank you. Carrie, as always, thank you for the complete presentation. On slide 3, where you made reference, and you have been preparing us for this, about the, you know, you always have bills that come in, and you never really, the books are never really closed until they're closed. So the figure came in at 800,000. Was that a number that was, how did you react when you saw that number? Was it lower or higher than you thought it was going to be? And how does that number compare to previous years where we've had late, you know, when we've had these types of closures?
What I will do, I will get you an exact figure in terms of previous years. However, I say I feel good and comfortable more so this year than last year, just given the some measures we've taken to increase bill payment, whereas before bills would come to me, or bills may go to the accounts payable person, a bill may go to the grant manager. And what we created was a distribution list so that we could see all bills coming in. Everybody's eyes are on it at the same time, so that we could talk about whether or not that bill was accurate, and then to get a quick payment on out the door. The other reason why I feel good about it is because the charter payments that we pay out are fixed. And the food service bills, we know that they're always high at about 200 and something thousand. So I'm looking at my other screen right now. And so if I'm saying, 800,000, but 595,000 of that is something that we automatically know, being a tuition payment, they're servicing our kids. And Chartwell's working so well with us through the whole COVID, helping to feed families, and just being on our beck and call for whatever we needed in terms of paperwork as well. I feel good about that because that's about 70% we knew of what those bills would be. So I'm okay with that.
Thank you. So if I were to summarize, late doesn't necessarily mean surprise in this realm.
That is accurate. That is accurate. I'm not gonna say, and I know that there are people out there watching. Yeah, right. No, we have had some surprises, but those surprises have been so minimal that it's not the balance in the scales.
Thank you.
Other board members, what questions, comments?
I have nothing.
Nothing. Okay. So I think this goes without saying, it's August 6th and this board hasn't approved a budget because the General Assembly of the state of Rhode Island has not met to approve a budget for FY21 because the federal government, Congress, has not acted on additional dollars that could help mitigate some of the issues that we're seeing at the state level and certainly at the municipal and school district level. And it's been incredibly frustrating to have ongoing conversations that include Dr. Toledo and members from RIDE, and not be able to get clear answers on how we're supposed to move forward with so much uncertainty. And so I share that because I know that that's frustration that's being felt directly by staff members, by parents, by students who are thinking, hey, it's August 6th, I'm supposed to start work or school at some point at the end of this month, and there's no clarity, there's no certainty. And so it's more of a comment. Know that we are trying our best to get direct answers from RIDE. In their defense, they also don't actually know what's up. And really it's on the General Assembly to act. And what we're hearing is that they might act in September. September is a whole other month and it's after we're supposed to start school. So none of that is helpful to this board. It's not helpful to district leaders across the state, but certainly not helpful to Dr. Downey Toledo, who has to make decisions that will directly impact staff and students before that supposed September date where the General Assembly is supposed to act. We heard that back in June, that they were going to act in July. There was no action taken, and we're now in August. And so it's been quite a road that we've had to take in trying to plan for what we don't know. And so I just want to say thank you for the folks who've been at the table really, grappling with that directly. So hearing no other questions or comments from board members, I want to just move on to the next item under new business, which is item 7A, transportation policy change during the pandemic.
Great. I'm going to try turning my video back on, but my internet was not cooperating. So we'll see if this works. So as everyone knows, one of the ways to try to contain the virus is to create more social distancing and spacing, and that's having a significant impact on transportation. And so the recommended guidelines are to significantly reduce the number of students riding on a school bus at any given time. So if a typical full-length school bus would seat 75 children in non-pandemic times, the guidance is telling us to reduce that down to 25. There is conversations of these guidelines changing with the Department of Health, but that is what we're operating with currently. And so what I'm bringing to the board for consideration is to modify our own policy during the pandemic to ensure that the students that we are providing transportation for are the students who need it the most, specifically students with mandated IEP transportation, but that we would actually consider, I'd ask you to consider not providing transportation for all students in pre-K, K, first and second grade that live more than a half mile from home as we would in a typical year. We do want to build in and ensure that that family hardship piece, which we added to the policy last year, remains, but I added some language of requiring approval by the superintendent. That is my recommendation, such that we can ensure that the students who do need the bus based on those mandated IEP transportation components can do so in the safest way possible. But I'll take any questions from the board.
I have a question.
Sonia, yes.
Is there another mechanism to temporarily suspend a policy other than actually amending the policy? So I'm thinking on the city side, the mayor issues executive orders that speaks to a temporary change of the rules with a focus or with justification. So as we limit, I don't know, the requirement, for example, the requirement of masks, it has to be done through the executive order because there are issues of First Amendment or, closing of the parks. So there has to be some justification, and I see what you're trying to do here, but I don't know that if amending our policy is it, because then you have to go through this 2 readings, and then we're going to come back. This is really a temporary based on an emergency, on the governor's declaration of a state of emergency that's still ongoing, that we're all living by. So I'm wondering if there's something else, and maybe I should have asked this earlier when we had legal counsel with us, but there's another mechanism by which we can do what you're trying to do here, just not by changing the policy.
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer, but could certainly consult with legal counsel. We did know we were being extra cautious by doing this because the state regs do not require, we provide more transportation in Central Falls than the state requires, because the requirements are actually for those students who live at a distance that is greater than even exists in Central Falls. So depending on how the board prefers, I can certainly check with legal counsel whether we would even need to bring it to a second reading to change it, or if there's another mechanism to do so.
Because
think that makes
no
a
matter
lot
what,
of
we
sense.
can't pass it tonight, right? Today's just first reading. So if there is a different way, you wouldn't have to wait a month before the board comes together. And if there's something akin to an executive order that could be issued by the board chair or the superintendent, then I think that would, and that would also give you the flexibility to amend as the year progresses without being stuck with our meeting schedule.
I really appreciate the suggestion, so I can certainly connect with legal counsel.
So you don't need action from us tonight on this, Dr. Toledo, because even if we were to go the traditional route, it would just be a first read.
Yeah.
So I'll ask just one more time if there are any other board members who have, comments or questions or suggestions. Andrew, I see your hand, and then, oh, Sonia, I'll call on you next.
Sure.
Thanks. Quickly, so Superintendent, as I understand this, in order to go with the 25%, once you have satisfied provision number 1 with students with IEP mandated transportation, can you give a ballpark of, in order to allow for family hardships, are these going to be rare or more common? I know it depends on each route and blah, 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 but just sort of in general, what's the likelihood that when you get to 3B that you're going to have, how much latitude do you think you'll have?
This is changing by the day as the guidance from RIDE changes. We believed we would have room on every route for this situation of family hardship. We may have even more, because one of the biggest shifts that's happened in the last week is that RIDE has said districts can run their own distance learning option for families based on preference and choice alone, not necessarily a documented medical need. And so as a result, and I'll share more about this in my update, we had an incredible team call every single family over the last 10 days and speak with families about what are these choices and options. And while we didn't reach all 3,000, of the families we reached, over 1,000 said they would prefer to have their student at home. And so I can imagine that the number of students who would be choosing to use their IEP mandated transportation would be even less, because some of those students may be opting to stay home.
Thank you.
Sonia, you had
Yeah, just a quick
you had a
question
comment?
on the pre-kindergarten. So you're saying most people would would choose to stay home. But as I think we've always done the pre-K just to ease and to ensure that families would bring their kids to school. I'm just concerned about the little ones not making it at all if that transportation is not there.
So interestingly, we just added pre-K officially last year. I don't know if everyone recalls. The state has an interesting stance where for those state-funded pre-K classrooms, they do not offer transportation, and we are not actually even allowed to use the pre-K grant to support pre-K transportation. So while we can certainly consider it, that RIDE's perspective, while they are strongly encouraging pre-K to happen in person, they are saying do not worry at all about transporting the students in that age group. Okay. I know that the RIDE answer is not necessarily aligned with how families are feeling about it, so we can certainly, to the extent that those seats exist and those hardships come in, we can certainly consider age as a factor.
Okay. Thank you.
Any others? I can't see everyone on my screen at the same time, so I want to make sure that I see everyone. Diosa, I think you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I want it. It's 25 students, right? The proposal, 25 students on the bus. You don't think that's a lot of kids?
Even 25, yeah, I think for some people that will feel crowded. The guidelines, the Department of Health is working on a playbook for us with even more safety guidelines, but some of the previews that we've seen, talk about windows on the bus being down to try to increase airflow. But yes, I hear you that will still, it will allow for
que isso vai nos permitir
entre sillas.
Anyone else?
¿Alguien más?
Okay. Seeing Toledo, for bringing this to us. We'll wait on you to connect with legal counsel and see.
Entonces, solo vamos a esperar que usted se contacte con la consejería legal, si podemos buscar otra forma de pasar esto por usted o por...
And then just keep us posted on when we should act on this.
Will do.
Great. All right, so moving on to the next item, under new business is a discussion regarding our mascot. This is on the agenda because certainly the conversations and the discussions we've been having or reflections we've been having on this board after the murder of George Floyd have sparked conversations about anti-racist, anti-Blackness, and anti-racism in general. I've done a lot of thinking about the ways in which even me as a woman who identifies as a person of color sort of uphold systems that are downright racist, right? And something that I've been thinking about a lot, just in my experience as someone who graduated from the district from K through 12, is a proud alum and is proud to be a warrior and always will be, is this identity that the district has had with Native images. It's on the floor of our high school gym. It is on the swag that we create and sell. It is part of our pep rallies, and ultimately it is racist. And it's racist, and I say that it's racist because when I listen to Native voices, they have been telling the world for a long time that they are not mascots, they are people, right? They are not caricatures, they are not cartoons, they are people. There's been a lot of activity in the NFL lately. I think the NFL, I am not a sports person, so forgive me. And some changes that have occurred to a specific team. I believe the name was the Washington Redskins. That happened after years and years and years of Native folks saying, this ain't it. You cannot use the word Redskin. You cannot use Native imagery and make a whole lot of money off of it and use that identity to play football. And so that's certainly part of what's sort of the reason why this is on the agenda. I had been having conversations separately with Dr. Downey Toledo about this on a laundry list of things and ideas that she and I have going. But separately, and I want to give a huge shout out to Assistant Principal Jamie Hill, separately was already doing the work to gather the history, to gather the information, to gather the resources that this district could take on to address this issue. And so shout out to you, Assistant Principal Hill, and I know you've been working with some other educators, including Ms. Simus and Mr. Encarnacion Rivera, to put together a letter that was directed to the Board of Trustees about this very issue. I'm excited about the direction in which we can take this. I think it's the right thing to do. Today is really just about opening the discussion, but my hope and my goal is that we come together, board members, teachers, students, administrators, and think through what a process could look like to remove Native imagery from our logos, from essentially everything, and sort of the identity that we claim as warriors, but also to do so through a lens of educating the very people involved. It's not enough to just say, let's take the imagery off without actually spending time reflecting and thinking and discussing about why having this as part of our identity is wrong. So I want to leave it at that, but want to invite other board members to share your perspective, your thoughts. Yeah.
I have a statement that was sent to him. Can I read that now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I have a statement that I received from Beatriz Patino. She's class of 1996. Give me 1 second. And she states, as someone who graduated in 1996 and reflects back on my experience at CF High, I can wholeheartedly say my connection to the school is beyond the physical building or mascot plastered on walls and athletic uniforms. I will be the first to say that while I was in school, I did not fully understand the implications and harm caused by having a Native American as our mascot. I did not comprehend the very real consequences of perpetuating a stereotype that in turn is dehumanizing and degrading, regardless of our warrior pride. It isn't about us. It's about understanding that this disregard of Indigenous people as humans and not mascots is unacceptable. If we want to honor our Indigenous family, let's do so by acknowledging the land we inhabit, and let's do so by lifting them up and fighting for their rights. Because my pride as a CF High graduate came from being a resident of a city that, despite the stereotypes, constant doubt, and lack of resources, always thrived because it puts people first. I didn't grow up having much, but I was surrounded by love, by family, friends, and neighbors that believed in me and the dignity of all humans. I will eternally be a proud CF High graduate, but doing the right thing will make me prouder. And she
Thank
was
you,
class of
Glenda Lee.
96. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I'm
So-
looking forward to having this conversation. It's time. Not just very recently, Bryant and I think it was on election day in June, as we were waiting for election results here at City Hall, right around this time, after we had been working for many, many hours, this came up, and he brought it up, and I think it's time. I said that we as a board had this conversation a few years ago. There was a process by which the district engaged in this conversation. I don't remember the details of how it was done, who was in it, whether it was as thoughtful as you speak to, Stephanie, where it was from a place of understanding. It was in many ways sort of like almost self-centered to us, as if we were going to lose something, it felt. And I think that there is a way that we can have this conversation that is much more empowering to our community and respectful to those whose image we're using, in the most disrespectful way we can. So I'm excited for this, and I think we can see where this is going, but I'm looking forward to the actual conversations that we're going to engage in what this could lead to, both for our students and our parents and the professionals who are in our buildings with their children.
Thank you, Sonia. Brian, I think you had unmuted yourself, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I actually, and I think this goes back, I don't know if it was with Sonia or with Stephanie that had this conversation, but I think back to when I was an 11th grader at CF High, right? I was in Mr. Ochi's class, may he rest in peace. And he, you know, the discussion in regards to like using a Native American as a mascot came up in class, and he ended up making a learning moment out of it when students were like on both sides of the conversation, right? So we ended up having to write a paper that night, whether we were for or against, right? It was a persuasive essay. And it was like a very strong learning moment that allowed us all to pretty much have a voice when it came to it. And I think that this is, you know, going back to what Stephanie said about like, this should be a moment for education, right? This is something that should be ingrained in our curriculum, whether it be in the humanities, whether it be, you know, it can be brought up in anything. We're talking about our land, we can talk about area, right? We can talk about area, and if you want to have a conversation about that, I'm a math teacher, we can talk, right? So trying to find a way of incorporating it not only in like the traditional classes that you would think of, but also in other classes, to actually allow that to be a conversation in the schools. And also at the middle school level, right? So we can engage our students as young as middle school, as elementary school, in these conversations, and have them, you know, kind of going back to the statement that Glenda Lee brought up, you know, have them have the understanding that the land that we are currently on, right? The land that I'm currently sitting on is not mine, right? It was never mine, it was not meant for me, nor was it for the people who came here, right? So just something to keep that in mind.
I think I would love to see the students involved in the change at the high school, you know, with the name and you know, choosing a different mascot, make it a learning experience. And then I also want to add in there, I was at Higginson today and it is painted on Higginson Court. So bringing it up to our city officials to have that removed there as well. And I graduated in '98. And for senior prank, one of the things was to steal the Indian statue that we had at the high school. I don't know if it's still there, but if it is, I would love to see that removed, either donated forward to an appropriate Indian tribe or just get rid of it. But yeah, I would love to see the change coming. It's been a long time coming. It's about time.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for your input. I too am excited about being able to do this together, comprehensively, collectively, and in a way that, you know, involves all stakeholders. So thank you for providing the space to do this. So moving on to the next item, it's calendars. The first is just the meetings of the Board of Trustees in the next, well, in 2020 to 2021 school year, and then a school calendar adjustment per RIDE's request. Dr. Toledo, I'll turn it to you if you want to provide us some context.
Sure. So for the first one, just the dates laid out would just continue this first Thursday for board meetings moving forward for the next year. And then the second item, in our plan that we submitted to the state for school reopening, we were scheduled to open on August 27th. So the state had put out a statewide calendar for a 180-day school year. We happen to have 185 days in our contract. And so because we had already planned to start earlier, we were continuing that. And RIDE's feedback on the plan was overwhelmingly positive. But one of the pieces that they strongly suggested we reconsider was when students would have their first day. So instead of coming in on Thursday, the 27th, to wait until that Monday, the 31st. In talking to RIDE more and more, I think they are anticipating that there might need to even be other shifts that could happen to the schedule. And so the guidance that I had from RIDE was to bring to the board the idea of voting to approve or align with the statewide calendar, and then we would build in those other 5 days as needed. So while I was originally bringing to you a shift to start on the 31st, I'm wondering if we should consider just the vote to actually be to align with the statewide calendar, as it also may continue to shift.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
I'm sorry. So you would want us to not necessarily vote on the specifics, but just to vote on aligning the calendar, whatever it is, to what the state says. So moving forward.
For this school year, yes.
This school year, so that we don't have to keep going and doing these votes. I like that. So, we need a motion for that?
Yep, I'll entertain a motion to approve a calendar that aligns with the state's recommendation, with the state's calendar.
Moved.
Moved by Andrew Brampton, a second by Glenda Liz Colon. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, the motion carries. So that was for the school calendar adjustment. Do you want us to vote on the meetings of our meet? That's just part of the calendar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so now moving on to homeschool applications.
Great. So we have just two applications for homeschooling. One is a continuation. So this is a family that was previously homeschooling, whereas the second is a family who is requesting to homeschool related to the pandemic. We have been receiving some inquiries, not formal applications of that nature, where I think there's a real opportunity to talk about the differences between now that we have possibly this virtual learning option for families where students can be at home but still part of the district, compared to the choice to homeschool and actually, you know, remove your child from the district. So I will say that this second application was submitted before we had the green light from RIDE to have a distance learning option. So we tried to reach out to the family today and did not get in touch, but even if approved, because I would recommend to approve both applications, we will continue to circle back with this family as the options for having your child at home due to concerns about the pandemic, but still be part of Central Falls School District evolve.
Right, is there any, do you need our formal approval?
I believe the board does vote to approve, and I'm recommending to approve.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
I'll motion.
Who-
I'll do it.
Sonia Grace moved to approve, seconded by Diosa Martinez. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so now we are moving into our public comment section of the meeting. So if you would like to provide public comment, please add your name to the chat function, please, which should be at the bottom right of your screen. Again, we're in the public comment section of this public meeting. So if you want to provide public comment, please add your name to the bottom right in the chat box. So to begin, Tracy Kavanaugh. And Michael, I believe you're helping us with that? Yes, okay, of course you are.
Hi, good evening. How is everyone? Today is August 6th, and the Central Falls School District has yet to recall any of the 42 teachers who have been laid off since June. This includes science teachers, MLL teachers, librarians, special educators, music and art teachers, physical education teachers, health teachers, and nurses. It is impossible for this district to educate Central Falls students without these teachers. According to the state budget law, if the General Assembly fails to pass an annual appropriation by July 1st, amounts equal to those appropriated in the prior fiscal year shall be automatically available for expenditure given monthly or quarterly. With that said, the Central Falls School District received a monthly appropriation for the month of July and should continue to receive monthly appropriations which should be used to recall teachers. I know for a fact that some of our laid off teachers have been offered positions in other districts. We have already lost a technology director and 2 principals. We cannot afford to add any of our talented teachers to this list. It is imperative that this board do what is right for our Central Falls students and recall our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Next is Jordana Ruggieri.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. I would like to start off by saying thank you to Stephanie and Bob, Jamie, Patricia, and the entire administrative team for their honesty, transparency, and compassion during the past few months. I would also like to say thank you to Tracy for your hard work and effort on behalf of the teachers in Central Falls. I am not sure that I can come up with a word or phrase to accurately describe how I am feeling. It is a range of emotions: fear, anxiety, helplessness, and a lot of anger, as I try to navigate this time as a devoted educator and a devoted mother. As I thought about what I wanted to say tonight, it was difficult to separate my feelings as a teacher and as a mother of 2 young boys. I fear getting sick. I fear my children getting sick. I fear my students getting sick. I fear my colleagues getting sick. I fear my family members of both students and staff getting sick. I fear having to isolate myself from my family. I fear the impact of my choices. I fear that I'm not doing what is best. On July 22nd, Commissioner Infante Green made the statement, "That is what responsible people do. They plan," during her weekly press conference. This comment was made in reference to the 4 plans developed by each district to ensure safety and health of students. This comment angered me because, as important as health and safety is, education of our students is equally as important, as that is the reason why we have schools. As an educator, it is unfair to know that valuable time for instructional planning is being wasted as we wait for a systems decision. I am angry that we are still fighting for a budget our students have a right to. I am angry that we don't have all of our teachers back. I am angry that we still do not have nurses in our district. I am angry that we, as teachers, have no idea what resources will be available to us. I am angry that RIDE and the governor is allowing this to happen. As a mother, I'm angry that the phenomenal teachers at my son's schools will not be able to provide them with the quality education that they both deserve, as they are in the same position as myself. Yesterday, the commissioner praised schools such as Little Compton and Middletown for their creativity and their reopening plans. Creativity relies on money. The community of Central Falls had to organize a rally to fight for funding to provide our students access and opportunity to a high-quality education and basic materials that all students should have the right to. We don't have the money to be creative. We barely have the money to function without a global pandemic, and we barely have the money to get by with a global pandemic. If having tents as part of your reopening plans is what makes a district stand out, then why aren't the money and resources given to every district so they are able to be creative? Why has this fallen on our district administration to try and figure this all out? How am I, as an educator in Central Falls, supposed to trust and believe that the decisions regarding my health and safety, when they are being made by the same people who allow our district to be underfunded year after year? All that our leaders are successfully doing is continuing to widen the equity gap and exacerbate the lack of opportunities, resources between the rich and the poor and the white and the minority. And they are continuing to do this during a pandemic, which speaks volumes about their respect and concern for our students and public education as a whole. There is nothing more I would love to go back to March 12th, to be inside room 101, to be with my students, and then to get home and hear all about the day my own children had in school. But that is not the reality right now. The mental health of our students is of vital importance, but so is the mental health of every stakeholder in the Central Falls School District. School buildings should not and cannot be opened until every student, every district, and every community has the means, resources, and money to ensure safety, regardless of zip code or politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordana, for sharing. Next, we have Ashley Briel.
It's Ashley Bowe.
Oh, Ashley Broke.
Bowe.
Oh, can you hear me, bro?
Oh, I see an R.
No.
You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. As a parent of 2 children in this district and someone who's been involved with the school district, I am torn with all these decisions about the school. I realistically cannot see, no matter what plan and safety measures are in place, for it being safe for any teacher or staff. I'm afraid to send my children to school. I'm afraid someone who has a low immune system that I'm going to get sick and I may not make it for my children. We know kids are going to spread this virus, and Dr. Fine's forum clearly put more fear into me by saying they will get this virus, they will get sick, it lingers in the air, it's an aerosol. The schools don't have great ventilation. I, for one, don't want to see anybody in this community or district suffer or experience long-term effects from this virus. No one should have to, when learning can be done in a safer way. No one should have to feel fear or anxiety about going to school or going to work and trying to teach children and students trying to get an education they deserve. I know parents want their kids in school, and many students struggled with distance learning, but students and teachers will be coming and going out of school from getting sick and doing distance learning. Teachers will not be able to teach effectively and it's not the new norm that they're used to teaching. Students will not be able to interact with each other or do things hands-on like they used to. There will be more of infection control being done, and that's not good for anyone's mental health, nor social or emotional needs were not going to be met the way they should be. Lastly, without a budget, how can we bring back nurses, teachers that have been laid off? How can you plan for a year, for the whole school year, with not knowing what budget you have to work with? This district has struggled enough, and it's time for this district and for the state to stop struggling, and time for the state to step up and give us the budget that we are entitled to and that we deserve and what we ask for. Because if we don't get the budget that we asked for, what is going to happen then? Are we going to be able to bring these teachers back or these nurses back? What is it going to look like for us within this next year? Thank you very much for your time and listening.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm sorry I butchered your last name, by the way.
Oh, it's okay.
All right. So that was it for public comments. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. We're absolutely listening. We share in your frustration. So the next item is the superintendent comment.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen again here. As I do that, I just want to thank all those who gave public comment. Really appreciate what you each raised, and do want to just start by saying, while I don't have a slide with updates on the teacher layoffs that Ms. Kavanaugh lifted up, I do want you to know this is something that we are working on every single day. Carrie referenced it in his finance update. Board Chair Gonzalez and I have probably been on Zooms on an average of 3 times a day, pushing on this issue. And so unfortunately, there's no update to give right now that would satisfy what everyone wants to hear. But I just want you to know that if anyone has questions, please do reach out. I know I'm talking to many of the 42 of you in a pretty ongoing way, and hearing how you're having these difficult struggles because you love working in Central Falls, you love the community of Central Falls, and you want to stay in Central Falls, and you have to explore other options. And so we stand alongside you, we are advocating for you, and we are doing everything we can to still bring all of you back. And so I wish we had a different update and a different HR memo to have been voting on tonight, but please know that that is our top priority, alongside, because it is part of a safe reopening of schools. With that, the slide you'll see right now is, I think it's really important that even though it can feel like all we can do right now is just put out the fires that keep happening, and living in that state of emergency of not having a budget and so much changing every day, I really believe that it's important that simultaneously that we are putting out those little fires everywhere. We are also thinking about the long term, even connecting back to when so many of the people on this, joining this meeting tonight were part of advocating at the State House. One of the asks was about a long-term conversation. And so for me, it's important that we are simultaneously always thinking about the immediate, but also the long term. So just as the bulk of my updates will certainly focus on this school reopening, or if we reopen in a physical way, I wanted to at least touch on the fact that we have other really critical priorities that we are working on simultaneously. And so just wanted to note that. So we'll go into those though on another night where we aren't already on hour 3 or 4 of the meeting. So in the center though, you'll see this idea of a safe school year. And we took advantage of the idea of this acronym and added as many S's and E's as we could. But really the way that we're thinking about our plan, it's not just about the quote unquote reopening, because we don't know if that will be our reality of opening buildings or not. And really the heart of school never closed. But how can we have a safe and strategic action and planning for an equitable and effective education? So it's not just about opening the doors, but doing this with great intention. On the next few slides as I go, I've put both the dedicated part of our website to school safe reopen, as well as our dedicated email inbox, so that anyone who's interested in reaching out with questions and or always seeing the latest updates, those are your two real go-to places. When you go to cfschools.net/safe reopen, you can now find a link to the plan that was submitted to RIDE. But it is meaty. It's over 50 pages with many hyperlinks. And so I'm hoping to share a more concise update with you all right now, but certainly we'll continue to hold the community and family forums that we've been having the last few weeks as a way to really engage in more question and answer. Okay, so just yesterday, during one of the governor's press conferences, she shared that while the state as a whole is still working toward this blue scenario of full in-person, that there were 3 communities that she is thinking that if we were opening tomorrow or today, that Central Falls would be one of the communities that would not open fully in person, but rather the partial in-person plan. Now, again, this is simply based on where the data is today. It is not to say that come August 31st, this is exactly what will happen. So I want to clarify that this is not saying we are doing partial in person.
Entonces eso no es decir que estamos haciendo parcialmente en persona, pero si ustedes están en un highway bien grande y están tratando de buscar qué salida salirse, y la idea es simplemente tener, eso es una opción basada en lo que nos han dicho.
To zoom into this plan a little bit more.
Solo para pasar en ese plan un poquito más en la situación parcial, todos los estudiantes
in person full time. And I say the opportunity because one of the biggest shifts since
y
we
para
had
aquellas personas que escuchan la interpretación, lastimosamente yo no puedo continuar interpretando. No sé si van a seguir la interpretación otra persona, pero me disculpan. Que tenga buenas noches.
And it's not only for students with documented medical needs. So every student pre-K to 6 would have an option to return in person. And then for partial in person, 7th to 12th graders would follow our equity schedule, meaning that depending on your level of need, you would have a different number of days in person. So students who are already in programs that have a reduced class size and therefore can be safer in school every day, such as our self-contained programs, our programs for students with significant intellectual disabilities, and our Unified Warrior programs, those students would have the opportunity to come in person all 5 days, even 7th to 12th grade, like their pre-K to 6th counterparts. And then for students who are not in a program that already had 15 or fewer students, we would follow an A-B type scenario where students would come in person 2 days a week and then be doing distance learning on the other days, with the small caveat that on sort of the day 5 of the cycle, the day that's not an A or a B, at the high school, they're really pushing to have that be another opportunity for in-person learning. The distinction, just so people know how some of these decisions are being made, is that at secondary, you don't have the same ability to stay in these pods. So the same kids all day because you're taking all the same courses. It's not as realistic at secondary. Whereas with a 3rd grader, you can ensure that they are with the same one teacher and same peer group to minimize any sort of spread of the virus. So if the governor's guidance, if the virus itself were to stay sort of at the same levels in Central Falls a few weeks out as it is today, this is where the state is believing we would start. Should I pause there for the board to ask any clarifying questions about this partial in-person plan, perhaps?
Yeah, board members, anyone have any specific questions on this? And the only thing I think would be helpful is if you could provide some context, not just for the board, but I think just for those listening, is why we can't dive into just one plan from you know, just choose one and run with it and make it sort of the best plan that we can. I think it's just important to understand the nuances in decision making.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I appreciate it. So the state has asked all districts to prepare for plans, and I can go back there if it's helpful, so that depending on the spread of the virus, we could be prepared for best case scenario, you know, sort of wishful thinking world where, you know, the spread of the virus is significantly down, vaccines are starting to come out, and you could be fully in person safely. And then the other extreme of like, actually the virus spread rises and we need to be in full distance learning again. But what the state, and this is happening nationally, is encouraging school districts and schools to do is to think about some options that blend those two. And so both the limited in-person and the partial in-person plans are sometimes also referred to as a hybrid plan, where students would have some in-person learning to really address the educational needs that we learned weren't always being met fully in distance learning, while also trying to minimize the spread of the virus by not having students all in the building at the same time. So hopefully that provides a bit of a framework for why the 4 plans. I will also say, if folks want to hear me elaborate on that a lot more, we recorded the family forums that happened about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and that can be found on that same website that I was referencing, so cfschools.net/safe-reopen, and you can hear a lot more details on that. Okay. So something that I wanted to share with everyone is what came out of a project that we were calling the Calling All Families project. We heard from families that some of the ways we were trying to get information, surveys, weren't always necessarily allowing people to ask the clarifying questions and have more of a dialogue about some of these scenarios. So we had an incredible team of homeschool liaisons and different multilingual staff members last week calling all 3,000 families And here's just a summary of the responses. And we learned that the largest group, over 1,000 families representing over 1,000 students, would prefer to not return to in-person schooling, even though they are physically able. There is no medical reason restricting those students from coming in. You'll see that just under about 1,000 families were not able to be reached. So that's important to note, that about a third we weren't able to reach. And you can also then on the right side of the slide sort of see how that broke down across the grade levels. So to me, what was interesting when I first heard that summary data of, oh, about a third of families are saying they'd prefer to have their child at home, I wondered if it was going to trend towards a certain age group, but actually pretty consistently, there were about a third of families at each grade band feeling like, I'm sorry, a third saying in person, and then about 2/3 saying prefer distance learning, but that happened across levels. So if we are really exploring an option to provide distance learning for anyone who wants it, it would go pre-K to 12. So when we took the initiative to reach out to all families, there were other bits of information we were trying to gather. And so something that comes up a lot is about access to internet. So wanted to summarize what we found out there. So we had 311 students had a family member or guardian saying that they did not have reliable internet at home. So about 19% of the families that we reached. And what's great is we now know who these students are, and we have ordered a sufficient number of hotspots to support all of those students. And of course, we know that there will likely be more students who we weren't able to reach, but certainly are making very intentional plans for how we can ensure that not only devices, but internet access do not become barriers to distance learning. You can pause again for any board questions.
Can I
Sonia, I see your hand. Yep.
For those you didn't reach, which is a large number, are we going to try to do this again? What time were these phone calls made? And what is different? Like, is it a work hour kind of thing where we need to just do a phone bank on Saturday and Sunday? Like, how do we bring the community in to reach these other families? Because it's a very large number to base, and I get trends and I get how it is, but what if this is the group that would really push one thing or the other? What do we want? How do we do that?
Great questions. So we did have people calling at all hours of the day. We did not do weekend calls, but certainly, oh no, I'm getting a text from Assistant Superintendent Lynch saying we did do weekends as well. So 24/7 we were calling. I do want to point out, when we surveyed families using like an electronic survey, we only heard from 200. So the fact that we reached 2,000 of 3,000, we're actually thrilled. And the other, because this was more to gauge trends, as you were saying, not make like final decisions or say your student is enrolling or not, it gave us, even if every family we didn't reach said, I don't want distance learning, I want to be fully in school, the fact that 1,000 people said yes tells us we need to develop this option. So if anything, the virtual learning option will just be even more robust, but it does seem like there's a clear desire to have that option. And so I think the next time around, we can certainly think about ways to reach more families and are open to any suggestions of other ways to do that. These are the constant tensions of, you know, we were bringing in employees who don't work during the summer and paying them to make the calls. So we also had to at some point say, okay, if you've made 2 or 3 attempts and haven't reached a family, we're gonna, at that point, sort of pause the project. But if we do move forward with the virtual learning option, we'll do it again. And because we were very clear that these were just expressions of preference, not decisions. So no one was making a final commitment. Something I keep saying is, even as a parent, not just as superintendent, I'm going back and forth every day about how I feel about sending my own kids to school or not, probably dependent on what news article I read that morning. And so we wanted people to know that they were really just sharing from that moment how they were feeling.
Thank you.
Sure. So in addition, we reached out to all of our staff and wanted to gauge similarly who was thinking about returning physically into the buildings, and then who for a variety of reasons would not be able to, and making sure that we were having those conversations between any of our team members and HR to really hear out different concerns and put plans in place for those who needed them. And so what's different since we took the poll, we sort of asked a general question about whether people would physically be returning or not, but then also this hypothetical before we knew that we would be able to offer an option. And so now the logic puzzle that will begin is to look at who are the staff members who have reasons why they cannot return to buildings, and then what are their roles, what are their certifications, how can we align those staff members, team members with the needs of the students whose families are saying, I'd really prefer to be at home next year. So that's what we had an initial conversation with the union today, but that will be a big bulk of next week's work, is trying to map out what this looks like. So to your point, Vice Chair Grace, we do need to know of every student how many kids at each grade level are going to make this decision. And our current thinking, but again, this is sort of day 2 of knowing that we had this option. We just got the approval from RIDE yesterday that we will need to know exact numbers to figure out how many of each grade level we would, classes we would be running virtually, or do we not have enough, say, 4th graders who want this, and so we need to actually do a mixed age group and have a 3rd, 4th, 5th band in virtual learning. So those are some of the things we're thinking through. And before we start the next round of calls to all families, we also need to make some decisions around, are families going to have to make a choice for the full year? Will we take this as a semester, a quarter? How do we want to consider, how we launch this? Okay. For time's sake, now that I see it's 9 o'clock, we were going to go into some more of the details around student engagement during distance learning, but I want to make sure we hit a few other things. So as was mentioned during the HR memo piece of the agenda, we are looking for some new team members, and so wanted to just share in this public forum, both that if you want to offer input or be part of an interview committee, and I'm speaking to community members, families, educators, team members, board members, you can email me, or I created some forms where people can share suggestions for the leadership qualities and the priorities that we need to be tackling, especially at Vets and Calcut, where we'll be looking for new school leaders. And then we also mentioned there's going to be this role supporting the technology team. And so if you are interested in being that technology team member or the principal of Vets or Calcut, you can email hr@cfschools.net or apply through SchoolSpring. We're hoping to have all 3 postings up by Monday. Below there, you can see some of the questions, and I want to thank some of our principals who helped develop the questions to help us really shape these postings in a different way, because as Board Member Colon mentioned, we often see quite a bit of turnover of our school leaders. I've only been here 2 years, and this is the second time I've seen sort of a big trend like this. And so we want to be learning from each time there's a transition, what we can be doing to ensure we're bringing in the right candidate who's a right fit for the needs of those schools, and then also providing the right supports. So eager to get input. The staff at both Calcut and Vets have provided a lot of responses already, and so we're excited to really shape these postings to not just be a generic, hey, we need a school leader, but we need this particular leader for this particular school. Okay. And then just as I like to always close with some celebrations of the work aligned to our values of equity, empowerment, and excellence. We ran a bunch of summer programs this last few weeks, and want to give a huge shout out to the work that was happening at the high school. We have 37 new members of the class of 2020, which is so exciting, and we'll be having a graduation on, I believe it's the 17th, a virtual graduation on August 17th. So huge kudos to the team who worked hard with not just seniors, but students across the high school grades. Over 150 credits were awarded during the credit recovery program. And so we're really pleased with that. That was run in person, along with another in-person pilot that focused on supporting some of our newcomers. And so I share that because as people say, what are we doing for safety? What are we doing for safety? This was a real opportunity for us to, with very small groups of students, try out some of the things that we're writing in plans and seeing what does it look like to operationalize them? What does it look like to ensure temperature checks before students come in, to socially distance, to provide meals, and still keep students safe. And so it was a huge learning experience for us, and one that allowed us to, I think, really refine our plan so that whether we're bringing back, 50% of students in the partial in person or whatever fluctuation across those 4 plans, that we learned a lot by having these 2 in-person programs this summer. And then a very successful other 2 programs, our expanded school year for our students with IEP mandated expanded school years was a great success virtually, as well as our Spark program for rising 5th through 8th graders, who got to really focus on not just academics, but also the arts and service learning. And then just one more final slide of updates, great things that are happening. So I want to make a bit of a plug. We're starting something that we're really thrilled about, which is a CFSD Geek Squad, if you will. And this is an opportunity for our high school students. So if you are a high school student or a parent of a high school student or a teacher of high school students and want to reach out, there are a few spaces left for 14 students to have a paid training this summer in partnership with a few different universities to learn some IT skills, to then during the school year be paid, I believe it's $15 an hour to support district-wide tech work. So we're really excited. It aligns with some of the work we're trying to do for an IT academy at Central Falls High School in the future. We got a grant from Computer Science for Rhode Island, and so this kicks off Monday, and there are a few spots left. So again, reach out to CF Technology at cfschools.net if you or your student wants to be a part of it. We broke ground on the Captain Hunt Playground this week. This was many years in the making, and the grants finally aligned. So this, grant funded, not something that we could have spent on anything else, but we're thrilled. Hopefully some kiddos at Captain Hunt will get to play in person on this new playground this upcoming school year. And then we had shared earlier this year the great news about a literacy grant that we were awarded for K-5, but we just found out since the last board meeting that we had to submit a separate application for pre-K, but is part of the same larger literacy grant umbrella. And we also got the pre-K. So we're really excited that pre-K to 5, for the next 5 years, we have $1 million to support the resources and the professional learning around literacy. And then finally, just shout out to Denise DeBarros. Every year she puts on an incredible event, the back to school event, where kids get backpacks and lots of great resources. And even though we can't hold it in person this year due to the pandemic, she and a team went to a warehouse and stuffed the backpacks and brought sufficient backpacks back to each school so that students can still get that incredible resource. So just want to thank her and everyone who volunteered on short notice last week to do that. So those are all the updates I have. Any questions?
Thank you for all of that. It's clear that even though, on top of dealing with the pandemic and planning for that, on top of having an uncertain budget, on top of dealing with not being prepared to recall staff, that there's still so many other things happening, pockets of positivity happening. And so I appreciate you and your team and everyone who's continuing to grind to ensure that we serve kids the best way that we can. Any questions or comments from board members? Andrew?
Thank you for that. Just how frequently are you being updated by the governor's office or RIDE in terms of the ongoing schedule?
We had a meeting with the commissioner today that was a kickoff to weekly meetings moving forward. We met with the governor, I believe it was last week. There's not a plan to have ongoing meetings with her, but she has been very receptive to hearing from the superintendents collectively. So we've actually put together a bunch of our priority asks for things that could come from her office as executive orders across the state, as opposed to each of us trying to spin our wheels to do redundant work over and over in each district.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I muted myself by mistake. So hearing no more comments or questions, we move on to board comment. Any board comments? No board comments. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at 5:30 p.m. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, at 9:10 p.m.
Nah, yeah, that's.
You mean 5:30 on Friday? No.
Did I get a motion? All right, Andrew Brampton, second by Brian Estrada. All those in favor to adjourn? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you very much.
Night.
Thank you. Take
Good night,
care.
everyone. See you.
Oh boy.